Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. I'd like to introduce our speaker today, who is Kanyisa Prices Makubele. She's a teacher in a primary school, Shapevi Primary School in South Africa, in Mpumalanga province. She's got a BA in Social and Health Services. Her major was in psychology. She's got a PGCE, postgraduate certificate in education. And at the moment, she's studying on a postgraduate diploma in inclusive education with UNISA, very relevant to this webinar. And throughout her whole educational career, she's received lots of certificates, one in online language teaching, in collaboration with the British Council, another in basic 4IR for educators, another certificate for practical robotics workshop, sounds interesting, a certificate in skills for the changing world as well, under the Teachers Union collaboration agreement. And then also she led a COELT course from September to November in 22. And recently she achieved first place in the District National Teaching Awards under the category Excellence in Primary School Teaching. Congratulations, Kanyisa.
Thank you.
And over to you for your webinar.
Okay, firstly, before I start my webinar, I would like to thank the British Council for giving me this opportunity to present this webinar. I really appreciate that, and I don't take it for granted. And also appreciating everyone who availed themselves to be part of this webinar. I believe it's going to bring a change in our classroom environment. So we are going to, Linda, can we start in slide? Yes, thank you. So we are going to start with our webinar. So I am going to introduce to you what are we expecting today. So the overview, we are going to introduce what is diversity in education. Our objective by the end of this webinar, we are aiming that each and everyone will understand what is diversity, what strategies are we supposed to use in our classroom, what benefits does the multi-level approaches and assessments help our learners who are having challenges in our classroom. Next. Right, so I would like just a few comments in the chat box. Tell me what you understand about diversity. Next, Linda. So I would like a few comments, then we can start. Just write to me what you understand about diversity and like what is your current classroom right now? Are your learners grouped in rows? Are they grouped in groups? Like, are you always like maybe putting them in rows or you're putting them in groups? So I would like to understand your current classroom right now. Right? Right, see a comment there, it's saying I'm grouping my learners based on different tribes and race. And then another comment is saying diversity. It's okay, let me go to this comment. Right, another comment say diversity means differences in education. Very interesting. So I want us to take a look on this, especially the one that says I group them based on their tribes and race in the classroom. So I want us, as we go in with this webinar, I want us to take a closer look on how we group our learners and how are we setting our classroom. And then another one is mentioning that diversity means differences in education, still like the same one. Another one saying multilingual learners with different needs and cultural backgrounds. So I'm not going to read all of the charts. However, if we still have time on our webinar, we are going to take some of them. Next, Linda. Right, so now, what is diversity in education? Diversity in education refers to inclusion and representation of individuals from a wide range of backgrounds, their experiences, their perspectives within the education setting. It encompasses various dimensions. It can be race. So it is very important that in your classroom, we don't group the learners based on their skin color. So you need to include every child, not discriminating them based on their skin color. And then another thing, it means that we don't look upon gender, whether it's a male or female. All of the students must be treated the same in their classroom environment. Another thing can be in ethnicity, which is common beliefs, maybe in a specific living area where we are living, or the religion. So learners who are coming from different ethnicity, they need to be accommodated and make sure that their beliefs are valued as well in the classroom environment. Another thing is their socioeconomic status. Remember, in our classroom, not every learner is the same. Some are coming from a poor background, some they can afford, they're coming from a middle class, some in their places, they have money. So it's very important that as a teacher, you don't discriminate a child based on where they are coming from. So your lesson needs to make sure that it includes everyone in the classroom. Another thing can be language. For example, where I teach, it's a multilingual school where we have Venda-speaking people, we have Sepedi, we have isiZulu, and then we have Tsonga-speaking learners. Some are even coming from Zimbabwe, some are coming from Mozambique. So as a teacher, it's very important that I make sure that when I plan my lesson, I need to make sure that I incorporate each and every child. Every child needs to feel valued. Every child needs to be feel respected based on their languages. So I need to make sure that I include everyone in my lesson. Religion and culture. It's very important as an educator that you believe each and every learner's beliefs and their culture, where they are coming from. So when I conduct a lesson, I must be very sensitive of their religion and their culture. There are things that in different cultures they are not supposed to do. So it's important that when I plan my lesson, I might not like force the child to perform a certain thing because it will be bridging their beliefs. And another thing is abilities. We have different learners in our class. So it's important that we identify their strengths and their weaknesses. When I conduct my lesson, I need to ensure that every child is catered based on their need. And sexual orientation, which is the attraction to their different genders. So I should not discriminate a child because they are attracted to a certain gender. So we need to ensure that we respect each and every learner. And the last thing, which is learning styles. So now that you have these learners with different experiences, different backgrounds, so it is important that when now I plan my lesson, I need to check which learning strategies am I going to use in this specific learning lesson. Embracing diversity in education aims to create an environment where all students, they need to feel valued, they need to feel the respect, they must be happy to come and be part of that lesson. Next. Right, we have different type of diversity. This is not limited to the ones that I showed today, but I just chose specific ones that I feel that we can talk about today. The first thing is culture diversity. So as a teacher, you need to be careful, especially when now you are conducting your lesson, be respectful of the culture diversity of learners. So it is important that, for example, when you are presenting a lesson and your lesson is focusing based on culture. So you need to ensure that you are going to incorporate each and every child in that classroom, in each and every culture of the learner in your classroom. This you can do maybe, for example, by making a classroom discussion where you make learners to discuss. They will be telling you about the things that they are allowed to do in their language, the things which are taboo, they are not allowed to do. And the positive impact is that learners start understanding each other. During break, you can even see them, like they will respect each other's they will respect each other's character and their belief. They will understand that this one cannot play with us like this because their culture maybe does not allow them. So it's very important that we need to incorporate every child's needs. The other thing is that in our curriculum, ensure that you present a lesson where it does not focus on one culture only. So your lesson must not, maybe you choose a specific culture and then you dwell more on it. So choose other cultures where you discuss and make your classroom exciting. Next. Right. Another thing is socio-economic diversity. It is important that you include every child in your lesson. Not every child can afford. So in your classroom, for example, if you have a lesson, maybe a project you want learners to do, think about learners who cannot afford maybe to buy certain materials. Make sure that you provide it in hand so that every child can be able to participate in that project, not feeling undermined, or maybe they are now looking at questioning themselves like, oh, I cannot afford this, and they start questioning themselves like, why am I not coming from that family? So it's very important as an educator that try to make sure that the project that you choose, ask yourself, am my learners going to be able to have these resources? Those who don't have the resources, how am I going to provide? And then number 3, abilities and learning styles. So now you must check the abilities of your learners. Check which learners are having a physical disability, the cognitive and the emotion. So it means now as a teacher, I'm aware of my learners. So I need to ensure that when I plan my lesson, I check like, how am I going to make sure that I cover each and every one in my lesson? And I need to make curriculum differentiation based on their needs. And I need to also accommodate learners who are maybe physically challenged, and I need to also know where am I going to group them so then they don't have challenges during my lesson. Next. Right, so we are going to go to divisions within education sector. We are talking about segregation. Segregation occurs when students with different disabilities are educated in a different environment. Then this can be a classroom or a different school. And when it comes to segregation, we need to understand that yes, there are learners who are placed in special schools, but not every learner who is in special school deserves to be in the school. There are learners who have severe disabilities. Yes, they can be placed in the special school because you will find that they require a special assistance. Maybe it can be medical attention as well, or a specialized person to help them. However, there is learners who like maybe they just use a wheelchair. If they can be put in the mainstream, they will be able to participate normally with other learners. So we need to ensure that every child gets accommodated in our classroom environment and in our schools. Next, Linda. We're coming to integration. So integration in education system refers to the incorporating of learners with different backgrounds, their abilities, their needs. So this is what we call segregation. So it's normally segregation is confused with inclusion, because you feel there is a school where it accommodates learners who maybe with a visual impairment, maybe some are using a wheelchair. But now when you come to the classroom, as a teacher, you take those learners, you put them separately in the classroom, and then the ones who don't have, those who are not physically challenged, you put them together. You are not you're not integrating these kids because there's still a separation in your classroom. Remember, when we conduct our lesson, our lesson needs to be inclusive based on the learner's ability, not based on their disability. Next. And we come to exclusion. And exclusion is where a child is not given an opportunity to participate with learners in the classroom environment. Normally, parents choose maybe to homeschool a child, maybe based on poverty, maybe because the child has a disability, So parents, based on different reasons that the parents have, so they decide to homeschool a child. But this creates an exclusion because that child is not having a lesson in a day-to-day basis with their peers. And I think this also creates a problem because that child, when it comes to social skills, they get limited. Next. For inclusion, previous slide, Linda. Right, so now the last one is inclusion. When we talk about inclusion, as you can see in that picture, a teacher is now identified the learner's abilities, not their physical disability, but their abilities. And when conducting a lesson, the teacher created an environment where every child can participate, and that they have a environment where it's free, they can discuss freely in their lesson. So this is what we call inclusion, where you are giving every learner an opportunity to perform based on their ability. Next. What is the importance of diversity or inclusion in education? So diversity, it promotes inclusivity and equality. The child in every class, every child in your class, they will feel the environment where they are given equal opportunities. They feel that they are not discriminated, and it can prevent barriers of learning. And it also enhances learning experiences. It makes learners to be exposed to different classroom activities. They can engage in different discussions, and it also makes the learning fun. Remember, students learn to appreciate and respect their differences when they are now talking about different topics. So if you give them the opportunity to talk about different topics, and you are allowing them to engage, they will be able to ensure that they also respect each other when it comes to teaching and learning. Next, Linda. Right, so now as a teacher, how do I identify the strength and the weaknesses to set a classroom that is inclusive and conductive? Right, so the first thing that I normally do in my classroom, I conduct a baseline assessment. So it is very important that I need to know the level where my learners are. For example, I just use English as an example, but this is not limited to English. You can use it in different learning areas. It can be in high school, also in secondary. For example, English is divided in 4 skills, which is listening and speaking, reading and viewing. It can be writing and presenting, and language and structure. So it's very important that when you do the baseline assessment, I don't just do maybe question paper that is based on listening and speaking, reading and viewing. So it means I need to break it in a good way to understand that which learners needs maybe support in listening and speaking, which learners need support in reading and viewing, which learners need support in writing and presenting, and which learners need support in language and structure and convention. So it means as a teacher, when I'm doing that baseline assessment, I will ensure that I have an observation list. I'm writing every challenge that my learners in that specific classroom are having, and I'll be recording my observations, and I will also check that, okay, now that I have these learners, when I conduct listening and speaking, which learner needs support when it comes to listening and speaking. When I conduct reading and viewing, for example, should I make certain learners for those who are struggling with reading? So it helps you to make a curriculum differentiation. Next. Right. How do we create a classroom where every learner feels accommodated and they feel included? As we can see in that picture, there is a picture where a teacher organize a classroom where learners can be seated in group. So it means now that I did my baseline assessment, I am going to group my learners based on their ability. I have seen that, okay, this one struggled with this. So it means I already at hand, I have planned how I'm going to support each and every learner based on their needs in that lesson. And it's very important that when you group learners, don't put them in the same group every time. Remember, I said you did your baseline assessment in listening and speaking. In the next lesson, if it's reading and viewing, they cannot still be in the same class if maybe they're not struggling with reading and viewing. So it means you'll be changing the learners around. And the positive impact is that the learners won't start now looking at each other. This one is unable to do a specific task. So when you're changing them around, they don't discriminate among each other because they know that I'm not seated in this group because I'm not able to do this specific task. So you need to be strategic as a teacher to ensure that when you are doing group work, ensure that every child feel accommodated and you don't put them in the same group maybe for the whole term. So you need to be changing them around based on their ability. And the second picture there, normally our school, the way we put our learners in our school, normally they are facing the same direction and the teacher is teaching. This is very dangerous because you'll find that the way you group your learners, you are not meeting their needs. So we need to really carefully think about how we group our learners. When I conduct a lesson, am I reaching to each and every child? So it is very important to ensure that you put that in your mind. Next, Linda. Right, so that is my classroom. This is my current classroom. So I ensure that I divided my classroom based on the learner's ability. So for example, we do have a reading corner. So I ensure that maybe the kids who struggle a little bit with reading, I will group them according to their abilities. And remember, I said you are making your observation. Sometimes this will need assistance in this specific area, but after a week, they improved. So it means I need to be strategically knowing that this is how I'm going to observe them. This is how I'm going to ensure that I change them around. So you need to be careful on how you are changing the learners around. So I have a reading corner. I have a corner where I ensure that I help especially learners who struggle with words. So I will have the words in hand, and these words, they are not going to be there like maybe the whole term. So it means when I do this specific lesson, I plan in hand and then I'll paste them, knowing that in this lesson, these are the words that I'm going to use the most. Those learners who are struggling with spelling, so they are free to move around the class, and then they have the available support within the classroom. So it's important through your planning, plan in hand as a teacher to ensure that you accommodate each and every learner. Next. Next, Linda. Now we are going to curriculum differentiation. Right, so we do have a traditional way of teaching. So this is where the teacher prepare a different lesson for different groups in the same class. I find this very tiring for a teacher to do, because now you have to make different lesson plan. It's time consuming, and when it comes to like teaching these learners, it means now I'm even separating, because I'll be moving to this chairs. I will teach them based on this lesson. So it creates an environment where it's even tiring for a teacher. Next, Linda. The other type is multi-level teaching. Multi-level teaching, you move away from traditional teaching, but you have one lesson based on the curriculum that your country is having. So you take one lesson, based on the observations that I have made. I know the weaknesses where my learners are struggling. I know the strength. So now I'm going to check as a teacher that, okay, I am going to conduct this lesson. So this is how I'm going to group my learners. So I'm checking the needs of the learners. This is how I am going to support my learners. I'm asking myself, which resources as a teacher in this lesson am I going to use? So this is even time consuming because you are planning at hand is one lesson, but this is how I am going to accommodate my learners. For an example, in your class, maybe you have a learner who is having ADHD. They have a problem with concentration. So you know that when maybe they are reading, they easily lose concentration. So it means when I'm preparing my lesson, same text, same theme that I'm teaching, but I'll make their text, maybe I'll highlight in words, so then it can help them to easily recognize those words. So multi-level teaching is very important because you are accommodating each and every child who are having different needs in the same lesson. Next. Now, how do we make assessment differentiation? We have visual, auditory, and then reading and writing. We have also kinetics. So we are going to touch on that. But before I proceed, Linda, can we go to our chat box and see if we can maybe handle some of the comments that they put in the chat box?
Yeah, there've been a few questions so far. Would you like to answer them now?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. So the first one was, is it really possible to accommodate all the needs of students in a class?
Right. I think it is very possible because as I said, you do your baseline. So you will, by doing that, you will know what type of learners are you having in that specific term and in that specific year that you are doing. So it's very important that when you, especially in the beginning of the year, I don't just assume that I just make a lesson plan without assessing my learners. So it's important that I get information. What type of learners am I going to teach this year? So sometimes maybe other learners, they are already assessed and now they're in my class. So I'll be aware that, okay, I have a child who has maybe dyslexia. So this is how I am going to ensure that I accommodate these learners. And in other countries, you find that learners are not assessed. So that's why importance of doing a baseline. You are making your own observation as a teacher. So I'm going to identify where are the weaknesses, where are the strengths, how am I going to ensure that I teach these learners and ensure that I cater everyone. Thank you, Linda.
Okay, yeah, that sounds okay with someone with dyslexia. But what about this question? Somebody asked, can a deaf student be really integrated in a class if no one speaks any sign language? So
Okay.
this is going a bit further, maybe.
Thank you. So if you can remember, when we went, I spoke about segregation. I said there are learners with severe disabilities. So which means that they need a special school. So to that state, for an example, if your school is not having correct resources, so we cannot just put a learner in that specific school, where else there is a school where there is resources where they can easily access and they can get help. So that is very important to understand that learners with severe disabilities, we cannot incorporate them in the mainstream if we don't have the enough resources. But however, there are schools that have resources and they are able to do that.
Okay, I think that's very important, isn't it? Because there are some things that teachers maybe can't deal with themselves. Yeah,
Yes.
Great. Another question was, is diversity in education needs a special needs curriculum? So would you call this a special needs curriculum that you're talking about?
Can you repeat your question, Lina?
The question was, is diversity in education needs a special needs curriculum?
Okay, diversity, as I mentioned, that you are accommodating each and every child according to their special needs. So it means that when you are conducting your lesson, doing diversity, learners with different learning disability, whether it's physical, whether it will be cognitive, which I will talk about it, and then whether it will be emotional behavior. So it means that I need to incorporate them. But special needs, it means that there is certain challenges that maybe in the mainstream. Remember that learners with maybe special needs, there are certain who cannot learn based on the standard of the curriculum that we are having in our current school. So those ones, they can be put in the special school. So diversity, it means differentiation, and then we're accommodating each and every child based on their ability.
Yeah, I think people now are thinking about their own contexts and thinking up questions about maybe students that they know themselves, which is interesting. Somebody asked just now, how can you accommodate neurodiverse learners in formal assessments?
All right. We are coming from different countries. However, in countries that they do assess the learners. For an example, if maybe a learner is having dyslexia, and there's also different type of dyslexia. There are learners who you need to only read for them, and then they're able to even write. And then there are learners that you needs both reading and writing, and you are going to ensure that you also write for them. So there is different type. If maybe a learner is assessed, so maybe the educational psychologist who assess that child is going to give recommendation that this is how you need to treat a child. However, it is very difficult in the countries where learners are not being assessed, because you won't know the recommendation. However, in the classroom as a teacher, when you are teaching them, when you are doing those observations, you can see that, okay, this child has a problem, especially when it comes to reading and writing, and then you will be assisting them in your classroom, in your assessment. So I think that answers your question.
Okay, great. If any of these questions haven't been answered, then please put another comment in the chat and we can ask them at the end. I've got two more at the moment. What strategies should we use in a highly academically diverse class? Oh, you're muted now.
Sorry. Yeah, I actually muted you by accident. I was actually muting someone else. Sorry.
Can you unmute, Kanyisa?
Apologies.
That's better.
Right.
Yeah, great.
I think I lost the question. Can you please repeat?
I'll repeat it. What strategies should we use in a highly academically diverse class?
Okay, the different strategies. I think we are going to use different strategies there. You can use maybe a discussion as one of the strategies. I think let me not be specific. I think you observe those learners, and then you check which one works, and the strategy that you use at this time, if maybe it didn't work, and then you change to another strategy. Because if I can be specific, you'll find that still the same level of their thinking is different.
Okay, great. And then what about people are talking about different types of classes now. How do you incorporate diversity successfully in a large class of maybe 50 learners?
Okay. Right. In my classroom, I have 55 learners. So what I do, the way I arrange my classroom is in groups. So most of the time they will be in group of 10. So I will it's still possible to apply the group work. So I will put maybe in group of 10. And then I will put maybe this is the yellow group, the red group, the blue group. And I'm strategically knowing that, okay, these learners, the way I group them, these are the ones that need this specific attention. I made the correct teaching aid in hand. So it is still possible to do a group work or group your learners and do a multi-level teaching in the classroom, which is having a larger number of learners.
Okay. Would you like to carry on with the questions now, or do you want to finish and then have questions at the end?
Yeah, I will have questions at the end because I want to finish the slides.
Okay, great. Okay, there are more questions coming in. Everyone's very interested, which is great. So
Okay.
carry on now. We'll have more questions at the end. Yeah.
Right, so we are going to assessment and differentiation. So we need to understand the type of learners that we are having in our classroom. So we have a different type of learning disabilities. We have dyslexia. Dyslexia is a child who is having a problem, especially when it comes to understanding languages and processing the language. So you need to check if you don't have those type of learners in your classroom. So it will help you to know that, okay, when I assess these learners, this is how I am going to assess them. This is how I'm going to assist them. The other, we have dyscalculia, which is a problem with when it comes to doing mathematics. The child has difficulties when it comes to mathematic abilities. So you need to also ensure that you accommodate those learners, or you become aware of those learners. We also have this graphia, where they have an impact, especially when it comes to the writing. The child cannot write clearly. They have problem with words recognition, their spelling. So also you need to also be aware of those learners. We also have the auditory processing disorder. These are the learners who have a problem, especially with hearing. Most of them, you'll see them having a hearing aid. So it's important that you identify those learners. It means that you ensure that the learner every day, if they are using hearing aid, is their hearing aid functioning in that lesson that you're conducting. So you also need to check when you are teaching, are they able to hear you properly? So it is very important that you ensure that you check those type of learners in your classroom. Another thing is a visual processing disorder. It affects how the brain interprets the visual text that you give a learner. So you also need to be careful of that. If you have those type of learners, which visual aid are you going to use that will assist or support the learner in that specific learning lesson? The other one is non-verbal learning disorder, which affects the verbal communication. You find that when you are teaching, sorry?
Excuse me.
Know. Is it fine?
Hello?
Should I continue?
Excuse me.
Sorry, Antonio, can you please come in maybe afterwards? Can you just type your questions now, and maybe we'll give time for you to ask a question or comment. All right. Thank you so much.
I'm afraid otherwise I would forget the question. Anyway,
we can just type it in the chat.
For the last then.
Yeah, please just type it in the chat.
All right,
please.
thank you very much. Okay.
Please carry on, Kanisa.
Okay, thank you so much. So please type in the question in the type box, then we'll come back to it. Linda, can you maybe ensure that you noted that question, then we'll come back to it. The other learning disability can be autism spectrum, which affects the social communication and interaction with other learners. So you must be aware of the learners if you are having those type of learners in your classroom. Another thing can be ADHD disorder, where you find those learners who have difficulties with attention. So you also need to identify those learning disabilities that might affect your teaching and learning in your classroom. So I am going to our next slide, Linda. Next slide. Right, so we're starting with the visual perspection. So 80% of information is gathered through our visual sense. So we need to be aware of this, that when I go to the classroom and I conduct my lesson, which strategies am I going to use to ensure that every learner can interpret maybe the information that I can give them? Some cannot understand it through reading, but when you give them the picture and then you are presenting a picture at hand, they can be able to interpret. For example, if it's reading and viewing, you are taking the picture of maybe the story that you are going to talk about. Some learners are able to even interpret and follow up what is happening in the story. So visual perspective is very important, using the visual aids or using the charts or the diagram when you are teaching. It also a support, a form of support that can help your learners in your classroom. And as I mentioned, for example, learners with the ADHD, you will highlight the words and then or you color code, so then it helps them with the way they understand that information. Next slide. Right, we continue with the visual perspective. So support for visual impairment. It provides accommodation for students with visual impairments. For example, the learners who have problem with seeing properly, you will enlarge their text. You will ensure that the font that you are using is not normal fonts like everyone else in the class. So you will make sure that their text is having a larger font. And then learners who struggle maybe with hearing, you will use a form of audio where maybe they're able to hear. So use different resources that are available. No, and I'm aware that not every school is having those resources. So use anything that is available within you to ensure that you are assisting this learner. So make sure also that, especially the kids with autism, that the instructions are laid correctly in their sheets, and they did understand what you are teaching. And you always repeat what maybe they are not clear about. So as teachers, we really need to be patient with these learners, because they need to be accommodated and they need to feel free to be part of our classroom. Next. Right, and now we're coming to auditory perspective. This is the ability to interpret and organize the stimulus perceived by auditory senses. It is considered the most important for language development and social interaction. Auditory perspective in the classroom environment, it refers to the ability for students to interpret and understand the sounds, including the speech. It also crucial when it comes to communication, to listening, and also to learning. So it's important that we be aware of our learners who are having challenges when it comes to hearing the sounds. So the strategies for supporting auditory perspective can be clear, concise instruction. So your instruction needs to be, make sure that it's very clear, and then you will repeat your instruction. Make sure that my learners hear the instruction correctly before they can proceed in the assessment that you gave them, whether it's informal or it can be formal. So ensure that your learners did understand what your instruction was. Next. And then the other thing, ensure that in your classroom you minimize the noise, use the visual text, and then you are... Okay.
Yeah, please carry on. Please carry on.
Okay, next slide. Right. So we have learners most of the time in the classroom with specific challenges. You will find that especially those who can who avoid writing. Normally they have specific challenges, so they will try to take long during their lesson. They will try to disrupt the classroom. They will try to make sure that they write little as possible. So as a teacher, it's very important that you identify those learners, then you check what is the challenges actually that they are having. So I try to engage them, help these learners, put them maybe in the classroom where they do the project work, maybe put them with their peers, and then they're able to be part of that lesson. So when you put them with their peers, it limits them to be disruptive in the class, because now they are able to interact with other learners. And make sure that you provide also the words that maybe they can be having a challenge. So normally kids cannot tell you that, ma'am, I'm having a challenge with this, but they are going to show you with the behavior. So it's very important that as a teacher, I be attentive of the behaviors of the learners, be having that mind and the heart to want to know that what is causing this learner to be disruptive in the classroom, or maybe doing a certain behavior that is not normal. So it's very important that you observe your learners in your classroom and try to find ways, how am I going to assist these learners and accommodate them in your lesson. Next. We're coming to the last one, which is kinetics. So kinetics is when you are conducting a lesson and there is movement-based. So as a teacher, I'm not standing in front of the learners and conducting the lesson, but I'm using my multi-level approach. So it means I'm teaching one lesson, but I'll be moving around, and then I'm busy assisting the learners based on their abilities and the way I've arranged them. I know that, okay, in this group, this is what I'm going to assist them, and this is the correct support that I'm going to give them. So it's very important that you also use the activities that are hands-on. Kids are able to be hands-on. For example, when you are teaching a lesson, maybe making a recipe. Let the learners do maybe a fruit salad in the classroom. They are cutting. So it also helps them when now you are telling them about vocabulary. When they cut maybe the apple into pieces, this is what it means. Also,
come and see everybody.
All right. So it's important that you move around as a teacher, and then you are assisting each and everyone in the classroom. So it makes a classroom environment where every learner engage. Even the classroom activities, they are even fun. They are not even afraid of the teacher. They easily engage with the teacher, and they also associate with the resources that they are using. The benefits for kinetics learning. Physical movement can make learning more engaging and can make the student to enjoy your lessons. Next. Right, so as I come to the end of this webinar, I want to share a story that I once had. There was a child who started speaking at the age of 8. So that child was living in the village. So when she started school, her teacher could observe that this child is having a challenge. So what the teacher did is that she observed the learner, that, okay, when I give the child a certain task, she's able to perform best. But the problem that the child could not express, she was having a problem with pronunciation of the words, especially when it comes to spelling. When she write to, it will be looking the other side, not normal the way we write our to. So what the teacher will do, will take, especially when it comes to performing role plays, she will take another child, and then the child will still act, but the other child was speaking in her behalf. So she was engaging the child in a lesson, and that child grew up to be a confident learner. She ended up going to high school, being a confident learner, though she understood that she was a different child, but she knew that I can still excel. She accepted herself. She further pursued her school, and then she went and studied psychology, because she wanted to understand, why am I a different child from other kids? And that child also went and studied PGCE, and now that child is presenting in front of you. Ladies and gentlemen, I am dyslexic. I have ADHD, so I might not learn like other kids, but if I get accommodated, I can be able to participate like other kids. So I would like us to continue with our questions. But I want to let every teacher to understand that children with dyslexic can perform best like other learners. I cannot speak fluently like other people, but I am able to ensure that I make sure that I understand myself, that I'm different from other learners, but I can still perform best in the abilities that God has given me. So ladies and gentlemen, let's go out there, let's accommodate our learners, because every child is different and they are special in their own way. Thank you.
What a wonderful personal story, Kanyisa. Thank you so much for sharing that about yourself. That's amazing. And congratulations for doing everything you have done through your life. And it's a real model for other people. And we can tell this to our students, can't we? Excellent. And we have got lots more questions, and we've actually got over 230 people in the webinar today. So it's obviously a very popular topic and everyone is very, very interested. I think we've got time for a few more questions. One that keeps coming up is, what about formal assessments? Now, how can the exam bodies in Africa accommodate learners with special needs? And how can you get differentiated formal assessments? Any idea?
Okay, as I'm going to answer this one in two sets. There are countries where they are already doing this. For example, in South Africa, when as a teacher you identified. So I am going to observe that, okay, this is what I'm observing about my learner. I will write my observations, and I put it in SMs, where the department is aware that in this classroom there is a child who's maybe having a problem with reading and writing. Then the department is going to send this education psychologist, and then they assess those learners. After assessing, then they give the teacher a report. So learners who maybe have a severe disabilities, then they are moved to special school. But those that the psychologists observe and see that, okay, they are fit to be in this normal school environment, then they stay there, and then there are recommendations of what the teacher is going to do, especially when they conduct their lessons. So in some parts of Africa's school, and also please, I'm interested to know that in your country, how are they doing? Another thing, I'm going to the second question. There are countries that they don't have those specific resources. I think this is very important as teachers now, that we also take a stand. This is a time to also make aware of our departments that, okay, we are having this challenge. And our learners are not being accommodated. So I think we need to also challenge the laws in our countries if maybe these learners are not being accommodated, because we cannot just stay and say that, okay, our country does not accommodate these learners. So I think this is where we need to stretch a little bit, and then we become that voice for these learners. Again, as I told you, that my teacher, she observed that I was having a challenge, and then she finds a way where she could assist me. And today I'm able to even though I cannot read fluently like other child, but I'm able to perform like normally like other people. So I think as a teacher, you don't have those resources. Also identify that this is the way that I'm going to help my child in order to make sure that they succeed, while you are waiting for the maybe laws or how they can accommodate those type of learners in your country.
Right, yeah. And it's true that so many countries don't have any resources, but it's right that the teachers need to fight for these, don't they? And we need to charities, countries. There's another one that keeps coming up. What about, how does inclusive learning work in secondary schools where different teachers teach different classes? It's much easier, I imagine, in a primary school where you're with the class all the time. Have you got any ideas about that?
Okay, so I teach grade 4. So I think it's the same as high school, because it's different teachers who are accessing the same class. So remember, you are having a specific lesson and your subject. So it means you prepare your lesson at hand. When I go to that specific classroom, I am having those lesson or teaching aids at hand. So it doesn't matter whether maybe you are not in the same classroom. So as a teacher, if maybe you are moving around, it means at hand, you plan your lesson plan. This is how I'm going to conduct my lesson. So you are still able to accommodate everyone, even though you're not based in one classroom.
And what about the other teachers, though? What can we do about them if the other teachers are the same students?
Remember, when you, maybe, for an example, in our school, we have 1 hour. So when I come with my my teaching aids, it means I'm going to use in that specific lesson. When I move, I'm going to use them again in another class. So I'm not leaving my teaching aids. So the other teacher as well can do the same. So I think we can do it that way.
Okay, great. There's one question from the Telegram group where there's a lot of other people also following this. What about where learners do something that's culturally opposite, or maybe come from a culture that's completely different from yours? How can you accommodate?
Right. Remember, you are a teacher. You are there to give the certain lesson. So maybe if you're having those type of learners, ensure that in your class, in your lesson, your lesson does not maybe come against their belief. So it means when I conduct that lesson, I stay away maybe to topics that will make that child maybe feel otherwise. So that's how you're going to accommodate. Ensure that remember, you did your observation, you did your assessment, so you know the type of learners that you're having. So when you do your lesson, I'm aware that in this topic, this is strategically, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm not going to touch this part, but I'm going to use other things to ensure that I pass the message that I want to teach as a teacher.
And you've got such a lot of wonderful infectious enthusiasm, which is wonderful. There's a lot of chat going on as well, and people answering each other's questions in the chat. I think we've got time for one more. What about mature learners? Do the same things apply? Mature learners who are slow and can't catch up, do you recommend the same sort of techniques?
Right. Remember, we said there are learners that seriously, like they need a form of maybe a special requirement to be taught. So for countries that have resources, I think it will be easier for them to quickly be assisted because they will be provided maybe resources to ensure that they get support. However, in the countries that they do not have those resources, I think as a teacher, you will try to find a strategy that works for them. And I wouldn't say like the learners will have to be excluded totally, because in our country we don't have this certain resources. So try to be accommodative. Again, I'm coming to saying that in the countries where we don't have enough resources, for an example, in South Africa, we're having a problem where educational psychologists are very limited. Sometimes a child can wait a whole year to be assessed. So we need to start now challenging our department but we are having this type of learners. So please make a way so then we can accommodate every child. So not that as a teachers we have answers to these things, but we observe them. We also need to challenge the people high above to ensure that they accommodate each and every child. And another thing, there are organizations maybe that are willing to assist. So if we can try to find ways where we can find help in our schools where we don't have materials, so then we can accommodate each and every one.
And that's a great point to end on, to be flexible and to challenge. Thank you so much, Kanyisa. Over to Steve to close the webinar.